can start with who I am. I'm Toni Cowan-Brown. I'm a European currently living in America. I say European only because I was born in France, British by passport, but never really lived in the UK, lived there for a short period of time and grew up in Belgium, which has meant, actually it's relevant that I say this because I think it's one of the reasons, there's two reasons why I really love, there's three reasons why I really love Formula One, but two of them have got to do with, it's just a melting pot of different cultures, nationalities, and I love that. Like I love being in the paddock and hearing all the different languages and seeing stuff lost in translation and see, Gunter and other team principals try and interact, and you can just see that it's either hits or it's a miss, and no one cares because everyone's speaking bad English, and I love that. And I think that just reminds me of home, where I used to live in Brussels, where everyone spoke bad English, but also everyone spoke 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different languages, and it was just you were just surrounded by incredibly smart people. And so I miss that when I a little bit when I moved to America, and now I'm seeing it pop up in different ways, which is kind of cool. So that's why I always say to people I'm European, but it's also one of the reasons that I love Formula One, I think, so much. And my role right now is I wear many different hats. I worked in politics and policy. I worked in tech. I've done the very corporate route. I've done the startup route. And now I'm essentially working for myself, there's loads of pros and cons to that. But the biggest pro for me is I get to work on different projects and partner and collaborate with people that I choose to collaborate and work with, which is very, very exciting. And so there's a couple of different hats. There's definitely the bigger, broader one, which is a content creator. I have 2 podcasts that I co-host in politics and tech. I have live Twitch streams where we talk mostly about the news in Formula One, but we come at it always from an angle of what's happening in the cultural landscape, what's happening in the political landscape, economic landscape, etc. And then I just create daily videos where I try and help answer people's questions, or I try and take people on a journey, or I try and tell a story. But also I do a lot of work as a tech advisor. I do a lot of work working with teams to try and build different projects that they want to work on. So the hardest thing for me right now is I'm constantly context switching, which is tricky. And for anyone who doesn't know what that means, it truly is when you're like deep diving, trying to do research, and then all of a sudden you have to get in front of the camera and be really succinct, which I'm terrible at. And you have to go, back into writing a project, and it's really hard. And I think uni teaches you that a lot, of being able to be in class, do a presentation, do deep research, write a quick memo, go back to doing deep research. Like, it's really tricky. And I think I'm doing more of that as a content creator, which is probably the hardest part of my job. So yeah, that was the least succinct who am I, but hopefully that gives you.
I can tell you've done a lot of things. I mean, your link tree shows how many things you have going on right now. So I think you explained that pretty well to me anyway.
Thank you. I'll take that, Shanna.
Would you mind going a little bit deeper into your political background and what you did back then?
So I studied politics and international relations with a focus on with a focus on European diplomacy. And I did that for 7 years. So I stayed in uni for 7 years, deciding that this was what I was really interested in. It was also partly that my whole family worked in and around the European institutions. So I always thought that that's where I would end up. And again, I have a real passion for problem solving, and again bring the best minds and the best brains into a problem. And I think, again, that's one of the reasons I love about the European project. And so I graduated from the College of Europe. I started in the European Commission, and my role at the European Commission, I worked for a DG that calls, at the time, it's had so many different names, but I think at the time it was DG Connect, which was basically, this is going to age me so much, but it was ICT for societal challenges, which basically means technology. How is technology making our transportation better? How is technology making healthcare better? How is, technology making all the things in all our societal moments, and how tech is both challenging them but helping it. And I worked in there, and I loved it. And I definitely had a moment of, if I don't get out now, I could be doing this for the next 40, 50 years, and I will have never lived and experienced anything other than the Brussels bubble. And it truly is a bubble. And so I convinced someone to give me a job in Brussels, in London, which was working for a big agency that was doing both lobbying, but also both doing PR, marketing agency. And it couldn't get more traditional. Like so many people, I know most people have like agency work in one way, shape, or form on their CV, and I always think it's a great thing to do because it helps you understand, A, do you love client work, or would you rather be on the client side? Do you like having multiple clients and switching in a day and doing a bunch of different projects, or do you like doing, no, I need to deep dive and help one project, one company succeed? Like and it's truly a love or hate relationship. People either love it or they really can't stand it, and you figure that out pretty quickly on. The other thing about agencies is it always puts you in front of a plethora of people from all different age groups, but also from all different backgrounds, which I always found really interesting. I got there at a time where digital was just peaking, and I struggled so much trying to convince the CEOs and the leadership and the exec of the companies that they need to focus way more time on digital, and we could bring in clients. And again, at the time, we separated digital from everything else, whereas today there's very few things that aren't digital in one way, shape, or form. So that was interesting seeing that transition. And I did a little bit of political work in that space. I had Uber as a client. Uber was trying to figure out their European and African expansion. And this is, again, a thing that I love with Formula One right now. That expansion basically was, okay, we've got a product that's a very American product built by Americans with Americans in mind for Americans. What does it look like when we try and bring this product into a new country and into a new landscape? The biggest mistake that most American companies do is thinking that Europe is this homogenous one thing. And you realize, oh no, it's 24 different languages. It's 28 at the time. Now with Brexit, 27 different markets with all their different rules and regulations. And it's actually really hard to comprehend. And it's the same. People make the same mistake talking about the African continent as if it's one homogenous thing. And it's like, no, there's a plethora of languages and a plethora of different countries here that you have to be aware of. And so I love doing that body of work with Uber, and it stayed with me of just like, here's the legislation and the regulation, and also just understanding, the history of black cabs. Like you can't just come in and think that you're not going to get pushback from the black cabs in London. Like you have to understand how this is rooted into every single, into every person's like personal habits, but also in the legislation. And then as a result of that, I was starting to build out this very weird niche, which is I really love the forward thinking tech, which is happening in America. And so I understood American companies, and I was working with a lot of American companies, but I also understood European politics and legislation and all of these different languages. And so there's an American company that sold campaigning software that came knocking on my door and says, I think we need you. We want to expand into Europe and the rest of the world. We don't understand the landscape and the market. And we have this incredible technology, which is helping get presidential candidates elected, or helping referendums run and helping politicians run their campaigns. And we think this is going to be useful in the European market. And that was my big deep dive that I did for about half a decade into the intersection of politics and tech, which brought up a whole bunch of other issues about, who has the right to run for office, who should have access to software, which are conversations that we still talk about today in the role of social media. So that's I hope that gives you a little bit of insights, but those were all the different roles and all the different ways I had an impact, or not even an impact. I spent my time in politics in some shape or form.
Yeah. Sounded interesting. It sounded like you had a lot of roles and you're actually quite enjoying it. So what actually brought the move to F1, and when did this actually start? What did you start with? What was your first content based around?
Oh, that's such a good question. Unlike Formula One, I'm not going to pretend I had a big strategy of expanding into this space. It just happened. Like truly, it just happened. Because I lived in Belgium for so long, Brussels, where it's an hour away from Spa-Francorchamps. Belgium is teeny, teeny, tiny. Like you can cross all of Belgium in, maybe 3 hours. And because it was so close, again, the only sport that was in my family, the only sport that my dad, looked at or had any remote interest was Formula One. And because he's a very political nerd like myself, he used to talk to me about the legislation changing around tobacco and the advertising and marketing of tobacco. And we remember the big tobacco era of Marlboro. And he was trying to explain to his 12-year-old daughter why tobacco was no longer in Marlboro. And it was just fascinating. But those were the conversations I would have with my dad. So it's funny because I think he taught me that, like, you can talk about motorsports, but on the fringes, you can talk about motorsports while talking about legislation and politics. And it's an interesting world that I'd actually never really thought about, like where my desire of talking about all the fringe topics about Formula One came from. So that's always been, I think, somewhat in the back of my mind. And I think, like many people, I fell in and out of love with the sport, and I think that's totally okay. And I don't think enough people talk about this. Like, it's okay to fall out of love with a sport because you don't feel seen, don't feel heard, don't feel like you've got a place there, don't feel like it's worth your time or your energy. And I think we're starting to see a little bit of that with the amount of content creators pouring their so many hours, so many loves, so many blood, sweat and tears into creating something, and F1 not taking any note. And I think F1's going to lose out there with content creators going, you know what, I'm going to go to Formula E, I'm going to go to Indy, I'm going to go to NASCAR, they care about my content. Sorry, that's a little bit of a divergent that we can talk about later on. But pandemic hit. I was in America, so on a bunch of different visas, changing visas, and had to have a moment of taking a sabbatical while we sorted out visas because we got stuck in Canada. Similar to what Savannah was sharing, like, you know, pandemic hit, and then I realized I was in the wrong country and the borders closed. And so we were supposed to be living in San Francisco. Our house was in San Francisco, all our belongings were there. We'd gone to Canada to do some paperwork for 3 days and ended up staying and being stuck in Canada for close to 8 months, I think. Which gave me time to reflect. And I thought, well, I've never taken a sabbatical. I've worked nonstop. And I'm always someone who, I like the next big project, but I'm always thinking about the next thing. And that's a big problem. I never think about or appreciate what I have. I'm always trying, and I'm working on that, but I'm always thinking about the next thing and the next step, which is both great because it creates an attitude of always moving, but it's not great because you miss, I think, some really good moments in life because you're always, you know, I'm the type of person who's on a holiday and planning the next one. And my friends are like, are you stupid? Like, what are you doing? Can you not plan the next holiday? And can you actually enjoy the one that you're on, or you're just going to miss it? We've all got our quirks. And so I had this moment of, okay, if you take away my job description, if you take away the logo of the company, the big company I work for, what's left? And why would anyone ever want to be sat at a dinner table next to me, or should be remotely excited by being sat next to me at a dinner party? And so you start thinking about, what do I like talking about? What's interesting? And I started seeing some through lines. And one of the through lines of, no matter what job I had, I love storytelling. And I love going on learning expeditions with other people. I love learning and discovering new things. And I love having that light bulb moment going, oh, that's why that's a thing. Or that's why I do these certain things. Like, I love those moments. And then we were in, I think, season 2 of Drive to Survive. Formula One was having many conversations about what does it look like to travel the world in a time of pandemic? Can the race still go on? Can it not? People were desperate for entertainment content and sports content, which wasn't happening. The rise of TikTok was happening. And so all of these things, this what I call the perfect storm, was happening. And so it meant that a lot of my friends who either had fallen out of love with Formula One or didn't know Formula One started discovering it through Drive to Survive or TikTok. And then I started getting a bunch of questions of like, hey, can you just help me understand, like, what's the relationship between AlphaTauri at the time, Toro Rosso, and Red Bull? Why is that different to the relationship that Alfa Romeo has with Ferrari? And I started realizing, oh, there's a conversation here about people not understanding that there's different engine providers and customer teams, but also there's only Red Bull who has this unique relationship by having 2 teams on the grid. And so I started sending voice memos and text messages. And then it really started, Shanna, to answer your question, of the first body. I think those were the first nuggets of content, but the first public body of content was because a friend of mine said, well, cool, I think I want to go back to a Formula One race. I haven't been in such a long time. I want to bring my kids. Can you give me like 10 bullet points, 10 things I need to know about this sport? And I thought, oh, easy, and started writing. And when I'd finished it, was basically a 54-page document. And he looked at me and said, there's no fucking way I'm reading this. What do you want me to do with this? I said 10 bullet points. And I was like, there's a lot to explain about this sport. And the moment I started explaining one thing, I realized, oh, I need to give you context, or I need to explain something else, or let me define some terms for you. And I'd started a newsletter, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to put this in my newsletter. And so created a little bit of a PDF type ebook and broke it down into 3 parts and put that out in the world. And that was my first body of work around, like, a deep dive around Formula One. And then 2 things happened. One, later on, that book or that guide landed on the desk of someone at Formula One. So the reason I say that is creating in public or creating out in the open is both equal parts scary, but so valuable, because you never know who's going to come across that content. You never know who's going to pick it up. You never know if someone's going to pick it up and later on have a job in the space that you want and go, oh, I remember that body of work that I discovered once. That's what happened with me with Aston Martin and we can talk about that. But there's something, I share that because there is something very special, no matter how hard it is, and the amount of humility that you need to just create out in the open and make mistakes. There's so much good that comes out of it. And then the second piece that I had is, okay, I need to remember what this friend of mine said, that there's no way they're sitting down and reading 54 pages. And at the same time, I was consuming TikTok and I was looking at the two going, can I turn this into bite-sized pieces of information? Because it looks like that's where, especially Gen Z, but a lot of people are starting to consume. And it looks like they want bite-sized pieces of information and they want that, like that nugget of information. So how can I take this 54-page guide and put it into TikTok? And so that's how the TikTok journey started. I can say this in hindsight, looking back, I don't think it was as clear to me as what I was doing at the time. This is why it's really hard. I feel like we all rewrite our own history in one way, shape or form, not purposefully and with no ill intentions. It's just, it seems so obvious to me now what was happening. And I can tell you at the time, I was just like desperately trying to get back to America. I was stuck in Canada. It was COVID chaos. And I don't think my brain was as clear as it is now when I tell the story. But there was definitely that moment of big body of work, short form content on the rise. How can I take this and turn it into something else?
No, it's interesting. I didn't realize you started with the newsletter, because I guess these days people will go straight to, if they want to start being a content creator, it's to those short form platforms. And these days it's TikTok. Everyone who wants to be a content creator is heading to TikTok first. And I just wanted to know whether you think that there's just a saturation in the market now, because I know when I'm going across it, I'm seeing so many people trying, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's scrolling after scrolling, and a lot of people are around that mark where before it would have been like, oh my god, you've got thousands of followers, but these days you were finding so many people around that 6,000 to 9,000 mark, which, like I said, back in the day would be amazing, but nowadays there's just so many because TikTok's such a massive platform. What do you think?
Ooh, you've brought up two interesting points for me, which is there's a weird, and I'm trying to wrap that because I've never thought about this. I'm trying to get my thoughts in some way, shape or form that makes sense. You know how we see this with athletes, that we think they've broken the record, no one's ever going to beat this. And 2 years later, we're like, oh my God, this woman has just broken the record again. How the hell are humans getting faster and faster and stronger and stronger? And we look at what breaking the record meant in, I'm just going to take running, for example, like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and you go, that was the fastest human on earth. And you kind of go, what's changed? Like, it makes no sense that as humans, we're getting faster and faster and more competent. And like, there's just, and I know there's a lot of elements to that, but there's something every time I hear of an athlete who's just broken a record or done something that was never done, I just go, where is the limit? Like, truly, it feels like we're blowing up a balloon and it gets expanding. And you go, some point it's going to pop, and it just never does. And I say that because I get a little bit of the same feeling with like content creators of just like, we used to think, oh my God, he or she has 10,000 followers. And then you go, no, they've got 50,000, and then it's like 1 million. And now we've got Mr. Beast, who has over 100 million YouTube subscribers. And that is unimaginable to fathom. And we've got, I think it's a guy who just broke the record of how many subscribers he has on Twitch. And to subscribe on Twitch, you're paying money. And he has now, I think, 200,000 subscribers, which means that 200,000 people paying him $5 a month, like that a month. And so you start doing the numbers and you go, where does this stop? And population is growing, so there's a big element to that. And I had this conversation of, is my audience limited to 4 million people? Because there's roughly around 4 million people in the world who consume Formula One content. So I was thinking, am I thinking too small? Will I never get, and I'm nowhere near 4 million, let's be very realistic, but I was like, could a content creator in Formula One ever get more than 4 million followers if the actual people who consume Formula One is 4 million? Is that what it's capped at, or is that just going to continue to evolve because you can actually consume Formula One in so many different ways these days? And the reason I bring that up is because you prompted with that thought of just like, what should we be proud of, or what does a good number look like? And it's really hard it's really hard to just ignore the numbers. It's really hard because at the same time, they mean nothing and they mean a lot. The one thing that I found that I do find interesting, that's also a kind of a crazy story that no one really talks about, is the amount of influencers who just bought their followers and then got successful and then because it looked like they had a huge following, a lot of people flocked to them. So then their following is legit, but it started out being all smoke and mirrors, and they made a lot of money from that. But also the brands know that they are charging a certain fee to get, a shout out of something, and they're charging for the followers, knowing that 40% of those followers, and that's a number that I'm throwing out in the air, but knowing that 40% of those followers are fake. And you go, so we all know it's broken and we all know it's fake, but we're still paying money and working with people based on the number of followers, knowing that a huge swath back in the day were just fake. I think that's less true today, because I think content creators today, it's less about the numbers. So I think you look like an idiot, and I think we've all become very smarter, being able to see who has purchased their followers, and the engagement is what's most important. To answer your actual question, I did say I was terrible at being succinct. Is it saturated? Yes and no. And when I say yes, I don't mean it in a bad way. I'm actually working on something right now of realizing I've stopped doing some of my most popular content series, one of them being like 10 facts you need to know about the Bahrain GP, 10 facts you need to know about the Monaco. People used to love those. It took time to get all the facts. But here's the thing. Everyone has access to most of these facts. So my content, although it was really interesting maybe 2 years ago when I started, 2021, because no one else was creating that content, it was really succinct, it was straight to the point. But of course, the barrier to being able to create that content is so incredibly low, which is exciting. That's one of the things I love about TikTok. But it also means that now there are 50 different versions of these 10 facts about a GP. And so I've had to be okay going, it doesn't matter if I was one of the first or part of the first people to create this content. It's no longer exciting to me because there's so many other content like that. But this is where I like it, because it's forced me to go, okay, Toni, well, what's the type of content that only you can create? And that showcased itself in two ways. The only type of content that I believe that I can create that most people can't is this intersection of truly understanding, and it goes back to the first 5 minutes of this conversation, understanding geopolitics, understanding international relations, understanding policy, understanding polarization in politics and how that transfers into, this is where most of my time is spent and most of my education was spent. And I don't know that many people who've studied it. There are definitely a lot, but I don't know of anyone who studied international politics, who understands the growth of tech and the social media landscape, and who's got an interest in Formula One and wants to create that type of content. So I was like, okay, that's one body of work. Let's hone in more into that. And then the second body of work I realized is, well, based on the work that I was previously doing, going back to creating out in the open brings value, Aston Martin knocked on my door and said, hey, we love how you explain Formula One. Also, we are 3 women, and we learned Formula One because they'd just been hired by Aston Martin at a time where they were coming obviously back into the sport after 60 years of being away. And I thought what's the word I'm looking for, both the CEO and the exec team had done something really clever, which was hire people outside of the motorsports world, which meant that they came with so much knowledge and so much goodness, and they could actually think and expand their worldview and think about things creatively. But it also meant that they didn't know that much about Formula One when they first started. And I kid you not, one of the people said, we just went through all of your videos and that's how we learned Formula One. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? And you sort of go back going, God, I hope my information is correct. And I hope I did the right amount of research. But what that meant is they were like, we love what you're doing and we want to give you more access so that you can create even more unique content. And so that was the second type of content. I was like, oh, so few people have the opportunity and the deep privilege of being in the paddock with the access that I have, which is very different than media credentials, because I am generally allowed to be sat next to the engineer, next to the mechanic, see what's on the screen, see how they're calculating the data, which means that my brain is spinning in all ways. And I'm going, oh, there are so many stories here to tell. And so that was the other piece of my content of, yes, the market is saturated, but I think as a content creator, you have to do this work of, okay, great. So there's way more people, which means I just need to make my content even bigger, even better, elevate it more, do more research, get more access, which means that now I'm again creating content that very few people are able to create. And I'm not the most creative person, I'm not the funniest person, but I do know how to do deep research and listen to people and have conversations. So I'm trying to bring that to the table. And I think as a content creator, you need to figure out what's the gift that I have that can allow me to make unique content that people would actually want, and how do I stand out? Because that's why I think no to the saturation, because there's no two people like me. There's no two people like Shauna, Savannah, Elizabeth. Like, we all come at it with a different worldview, different upbringing, different understandings, different opinions, different education. And so we can definitely have like this multitude of content. There is something to be said about, if you want to stand out, it's consistency. That quality has to be always there. And again, the short form content is big right now, but I do think we're going to see a flip back to slower content, to longer form content. I think we're going to have people who are like, cool, I understand the thing now. I want to talk about it. I will give me more about, this evolution of politics and Formula One, or give me more about the evolutions of internal combustion engines in the future. Like, I think people are slowly starting to slow down and want to digest longer form content. And that takes a whole different body of work and skill set to do.
Yeah, so going back to like one of the first few things you said in this nice blog, which obviously was very informative, but you said that there's about 4 million people who consume F1 content, and that's kind of like the size of your like
target audience. Yeah,
target audience. That's as big as target audience as you can target. Sorry, I'm struggling with English today.
I struggle with English every day, don't you worry.
So, and you've also started to work a little bit towards Formula E. And the thing that I've noticed with a lot of my friends, actually this year has been the year that a lot of people have started to transition into Formula E and their interest into Formula E. Do you feel like it's like the target audience is still fixed to about that size, and you're just trying to convert a few people? And do you feel like you're the kind of person who could bring people to motorsports beyond Formula E, which I guess is the closest sibling to F1, but things to like WEC, WRC, and other types of racing as well?
Yes and no. I don't know about the fixed audience. Again, it's a question that I've had, and it's generally a question that I pose myself. I think I even did a TikTok video about it, which wouldn't surprise me. I feel like my brain is in tiny little TikTok videos these days, but I think I had that moment of, if more or less the audience is 4 million, are we capped at that? I actually think the answer is no. I truly think there's a lot of people who don't consider themselves Formula One fans, who actually consider Formula One content, if it's on the fringe, or they're just like, oh, that's cool. I never thought about it from a tech angle or cultural angle, etc. Am I the right person to bring? It depends. If I'm excited by something, then absolutely. If I'm just faking it just because I want access, then I'm probably not, because I'm not going to be excited by it. The thing that I know that has gotten in my way is I'm both a broad and deep person, which means that I have, and you will see by the lack of succinctness, I have such a hard, it's what would make me a terrible politician. I can't just say, absolutely, we can solve it. I will say, oh, yeah, we should solve it. Here's why we should solve it. Here's why it's going to be really hard to solve. Here's all the problems that are going to get, like, I need context, and my worldview always functions with contextual aspects of it. So again, terrible politician, probably a terrible TikToker, let's be very real. And so the reason why I can't do more than one sport is because my brain goes so deep that by the time I yank myself out, I'm like, oh, it's 7 p.m. Great. I've spent a whole day on one topic that I'm trying to get an answer to. And because I do broad research and deep research, I don't have time to do another sport. And so that's what I tell people is like, if I know F1 is the hype right now, but I know of people who look at it and go, I'm actually bored of it. I was like, great, like do WEC, do endurance, do Extreme E, do Formula E. There's so many other series that you could. And so I do think if you want to be a content creator in a space, you need to have that somewhat emotional attachment to something that means that you're willing to do that research and talk about it time and time again. And I'm slowly starting to get that with Formula E, because I'm looking at Formula E from like a flip side of Formula One. I do generally wonder what is the future of Formula One. And I wonder if in 30 years, Formula One makes sense right now because we're still doing cars with ICEs, but there's going to be coming a time. I don't know of anyone that I'm talking to right now who's thinking about buying their first car who's not thinking about going electric. And if they're not thinking about going electric, they're thinking about a vintage car. And so where my head is at is like, is Formula One going to become like this vintage classic car race in 30 years? And we're going to look at it and go, oh, how cute. They've got these internal combustion engines. That's weird. And they use fuel. Because truly, but then does it start making sense? And we're having the conversations right now with AlphaTauri of the marketing, like the marketing isn't actually helping the brand. So is it worth having this second team on the grid that's costing so much marketing money? Should that money be put elsewhere? And so again, long-winded answer to say, I think I am the right person in certain aspects, and that's what I've enjoyed with the team of like, I've put myself like, let's do a deep dive into Formula E, because I do see it as like a potential flip side of the Formula One coin of, I do see this as potentially the future of sports, or the future of motorsports, or the single seater, I should say, racing, because it makes sense, because they're developing technology that's finding itself into road cars, which is exciting to a lot of people. But I do also think there are a lot of other people who have been focused on electric races and electric vehicles for so long, and I'm starting to see them getting the opportunities and the, you know, to create the content and for their content to be seen. And so truly, I'm just like, yes, I'd love to do world endurance, yet, but am I a fan of it the way I am? I absolutely love Formula One. Maybe not. So maybe I'm not the right person to do it. Maybe I can help highlight people and kick off conversations. And if I can lend my voice to that, then absolutely. And look, maybe I'll change. Maybe I'll fall out of love, you know, in a couple of years with Formula One, and fall massively in love with Formula E. And that will be the one thing. So, and again, I think that's really hard when you're a content creator creating content. And this is a thing, I know this is on a tangent, but I always think about this of, and we had this conversation with WTF1. Do you follow the creator or do you follow their content? And does it matter? Are the two intertwined? Can the two be separated? Are people following my content because they enjoy me? And if all of a sudden I start talking more and more about Formula E and they go, holy crap, that's actually really exciting. And whatever you put in front of us, we're going to digest because we like the way you tell your stories. Or truly, and I think it's 50-50, or it's a different type or a different maths on there. It could be a 30-70 split, I don't know, but I do know that there are some people who don't care about me at all and who just want the nuggets of information and the content I deliver, and I don't think that's bad, but it's something I do think about. Does it matter that it's coming from me, or is it the content that matters the most? And that's really hard as a content creator, because you put a lot of yourself out there, which means that I often have the conversation of, do you just not like me, or do you just not like my content? Was my content not good enough, or do you just hate, you know, I've had people say, I love you, but I can't consume your content. I hate your orange nails. I hate orange. I'm like, cool. I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. I'm not about to change my nail color, so the content is more palatable for you. That's a weird statement for someone to say to me, but I also get it. You will never consume my content because you don't like me, which again is I don't think a lot of people think about this when they go into the creator spaces. People will judge you for you, and that's a weird feeling.
Well, I think I can speak for all of us and say we don't hate your nails or anything about you. So we'll take
your nails.
Yeah, I mean, they've become part of your brand now. It's amazing. People notice it. So anyone who thinks otherwise, well, guess what? It's worked very well.
It worked well until here, exactly.
You mentioned before the switch from short form content being the leader right now, but going back to long form. You know, YouTube used to be one of the biggest platforms, and then Twitch took over because people were happy to just watch people stream for hours, and now TikTok. On that, because TikTok isn't really an avenue someone can have as a career, especially in F1 content, unless you're sponsored or you have great connections and you have millions of followers.
Yep.
It's something where, say with other platforms, I know a lot of people, YouTubers especially, have said branch out into other platforms. If you've got a audience on TikTok, take them somewhere where you can make it viable. And I know that you are on Twitch, and I think you mentioned that Twitch brought you on as a partner. Do you think it is a good thing for content creators these days to really make sure they try and get their audience to go elsewhere and follow them to another platform?
Yes. I think there's two ways of looking at this. One, it's if you want to do this full time, it's like thinking about your revenue streams, monetization, diversify that monetization. Right now, making any money on TikTok, unless you have tens of millions of followers, is really hard. And I mean directly on TikTok, where the way I've treated TikTok is like a funnel. So it's my marketing funnel, it's my advertising, it's my free nuggets of information. And a part of that, and it's funny because I think this year might be the first year that one of my really wackadoo ideas that I put out from a marketing perspective on TikTok, one of the teams have reached out and we're talking about potentially making one of those happen, which is kind of crazy. But so that's my monetization, is like I put out all of the content out there, and then I need to think about, okay, where do I take people who want to actually dive into a topic? Where am I taking them to where I can actually make money? And you can make money on YouTube for AdSense. I was to your point, for 7 months. I think last month was the last month with Twitch, but was a partner. I'm an affiliate, but was a partner with Twitch for 7 months. I'm trying to figure out the platform. And that was a good chunk of change there. So you just need to figure out, I wouldn't put all my, I would never put all my eggs in one basket. I think that's dangerous. The best thing you can ever do is, how do you own the relationship with this audience? And the only way, in my opinion, you own the relationship is if you know the email address tied to that person. And one of the very few ways still today that you can have that relationship is by owning a newsletter. And so I truly think that the people who have a newsletter, who is directly going into someone's inbox, and it's not a platform that's taking ownership of that, they're the ones that are going to probably win in the long term, because there is massive value to be able to go to a brand and say, I have 50,000 email addresses under my belt right now of people who are taking good. I'm not going to take advantage of it, but that for me is way more powerful than you have 100,000 followers on TikTok who have no idea who they are. All I know is basic demographics. But if TikTok was deleted tomorrow, I have no way of contacting these 100,000 people. Like I don't know who you are. Whereas no matter what happens, you still own that relationship with the people with whom you own an email address. So I think that is probably the most valuable avenue. But also I think like having different cadences for different people and targeting the content for different types of audiences. I think there's value in the way I look at it is, if TikTok is my funnel, I'm driving them to Twitch, but also and this is why I need to start a YouTube channel this year, but realizing that Twitch is still a very unique thing. Asking people to spend 3 to 4 hours with you on a Twitch stream live, you've got some dedicated audience and I have some of the best conversations there, but it's also a very unique thing that not a lot of people will want to do. And so I am massively missing out right now, because my written content, I stopped my newsletter because of lack of time. And so I'm missing out on that. And I'm missing out on static content that's long form that lives elsewhere on YouTube, for example. So I completely agree with everything that you said and the way you laid it out. I just think you need to be smart. But look, there's other people who will say choose one thing and do it incredibly well and do it 100%. YouTubers will often say that, like, all I do is YouTube. And I think that's worthwhile with YouTube. I think it's a little bit more scary with TikTok. But that being said, there's been a lot of people who were very successful on TikTok. It's draining. I don't know if you saw, but there's a couple of interesting conversations with Emma Chamberlain these days where YouTube made her, she got her massive following, and now she's, all of these other things. She's a Louis Vuitton ambassador. She's got her coffee thing. And she was saying it was draining putting out content, but it is YouTube that made her. And she's one of the few people, I think, that, like, for her, YouTube was the final destination, but somewhat in her job became a stepping stone to all of the other things that has allowed her, to create a business in all of these other spaces, which is exciting, I think.
It's quite interesting. Oh, sorry, my voice gone then. It's quite interesting you sort of mentioned, obviously, having to give up the newsletter because of time, etc.
Yeah.
Because you are involved in so many different things. Like, how do you manage your time in that regard? Or is that kind of just the exciting thing about content creation? Or is it something that you actually consider kind of draining at times?
I have no idea, Savannah. Like, I've tried everything. I've tried Mondays on newsletters, Tuesdays are podcast recording, Wednesdays is all of my, all of the stuff for which I'm an advisor is the tech deep dive. And then I'm like, okay, this doesn't work because I can't force people to only talk with me on a Wednesday or a Tuesday or a Thursday, depending on what bucket I put them in. I also realized that what I was talking about, and this is the piece that I'm failing at, that I'm really trying to get better at, is, holy shit, for example, this right now, realistically, what I'm missing right now is I should have my phone on a tripod here and saying, oh, by the way, I'm going to record a few pieces and make myself content out of this down the line. But I'm not, because I don't think my brain doesn't think like that quite yet. It's the trick that I'm missing with, I go live on Twitch for 3 hours twice a week. Why am I not taking this and dumping it on YouTube and then clipping shorter form content, like a 12-minute conversation that we might have about Mohammed bin Sulayem and his latest comments and what that means about female representation? Like, I do those deep dives. So why don't I just clip those 12 minutes and just put them on YouTube? I should. I just don't. There's no reason why I don't. I just don't. And so I think the best way you can think about it, Savannah, to your point of how do you maximize your time in the smartest way possible? And again, I need the setting up of all of this is where I'm at right now, and that takes time. But I think once you set it up, it makes perfect sense that TikTok video should also go on Instagram Reels, should also go on a YouTube short. Off you go, bang, put it out in the world. Great. Similar to like the research that I do, that I work sometimes for weeks or months on a 60-second TikTok video, that should be a 12-minute long form YouTube video. I've done the research. The research is there. I can talk about it for for me, talking about something for 8 minutes is not a hard thing. I can make that happen. And so I think I'm trying to be gentle with myself of just like, okay, it's actual chaos right now, but it's organized chaos in that everything's planned. I know what I need to do. I'm just not maximizing the amount of stuff that I'm doing, and I should be. And I think most people who are like YouTube professionals would look at this and going, this is asinine. Like, you're missing so many things, woman. Like, you're making your life harder versus easier. And again, like, the newsletter shouldn't be difficult. I do this research. I prep for 3 hours for every Twitch stream. Why doesn't that prep just go into a newsletter? And again, it's just an extra hour of work to do all of these things. But what my fear with that is then I just become this incredibly well-oiled content machine, and you don't leave any room for life, which then becomes scary, because the room for life is where I actually get some of my ideas. And I often talk about this as like the creator paradox is, you consume a lot to get a lot of ideas, and then you put your ideas out in the world, and then you've lost 4 ideas, and then you consume, but basically you go back into consumption mode. And when you're consuming, what my brain does is, you're an idiot. Someone else has already done this. Why would someone else want to hear this? That post, and I have this a lot on TikTok, and I think Shana, you brought this up, of you scroll and you're like, yep, heard this, I've seen this already, seen this. And I have this a lot with TikTok creators who just like, breaking news, and I'm just like, I can't chase the breaking news because I find it soul sucking. I don't like being on a beat. I don't like chasing the headlines, but it's great for your following. Anyone who's the first to publish something or talk about something, because to your point, you have time to listen to a 30-second TikTok, but you're not going to listen to a 3rd, 4th, 5th version of the exact same topic unless you add something bigger and better to the mix, like a thought-provoking idea or an opinion. So these are all the things that go through my brain. But honestly, it's just chaos right now, but organized chaos in some way, shape or form. And
it sounds a lot like what we do, because like the fact that you've stopped doing the newsletter, I'm sure the girls and the rest of the team would be very familiar with me saying, oh, we should totally do this, it would totally make sense, and then everyone's like, please, no more.
Yeah.
No more.
It's hard.
Yeah, and one of the things that we really focus on is that transparency, like trying to basically say, 4 out of 5 of us are in full-time education and are still trying to do things with our life. And on top of that, we're doing racing roles. Yeah. And then Shanna is, trying to make it into the motorsports industry from a work point of view. And she's juggling, I don't know how many projects, and she still has time for all of my ideas. And last week was the first time she said, please, no more.
It's good to know your boundaries. I will say this, every job I ever got was because of my extracurricular activities. They did not care about and again, it's easier said than done. People look at it and go, okay, cool, she's got an education, she graduated, great, don't need to worry about that. There is something to be said about that. But there isn't a single interview that I had where someone was like, talk to me about the grades that you got here, or talk to me about this lesson that you taught. No, they were just like, wait, talk to me about this thing you built over there on the side. Why? How? What skills did you learn from it? Because that's the thing that separates you from everyone else. So there is, I think now you're doing it all the right way. Like, now is the time when you're in your full-time education to be doing all the other stuff, because that is 100% what's going to get you to stand out. And I see it today. There's women that interviewed me who were working on a magazine or for a magazine or working on a project that wanted to interview me, and that now work in Formula One. And I can almost guarantee you it's not the education that mattered. It was that, wait, you did this other thing and you've got a portfolio. You can show me, like, I can write, I can interview people, I can, do research in this topic. I've got thought-provoking ideas like that. That's why these women got hired. And it was mostly women, actually. I'm sure there's some great men who've done some incredible things. But the last 4 or 5 examples I have of this were the women who juggled all of these extracurricular activities that just allowed them to stand out, which I think is epic.
I think, obviously, like, talking about us as a team, like, it's very much a case of, if like Liz is like, look, this week I've got to do this, can someone take this, or can someone cover this? Like, have you ever considered sort of outsourcing help for the stuff you do, or is it, because it's so niche, a bit difficult to find somebody that understands it on the level that you do, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, no, it does. I'll say one thing also, Savannah, the skill sets that the 3, 4, 5 of you are learning about working together, delegating, stepping up, all of that, so invaluable. And that's another thing that I think most people don't realize is when you're doing these types of projects, forget what you're learning from a content perspective. Everything that you're learning from a skills management perspective is so invaluable. And that's the stuff that I would like put on your CV. I'm just like, I coordinated multi projects across 5 different time zones. Like, that's stuff that most people going into the workforce don't learn on the job because they've never done it before. So just when you were saying that, Savannah, I was like, this is so incredible what you're all doing, all the things that you're teaching yourselves and learning on the job, essentially. Yes, everyone, my deep friends and my best friends around me are just like, hire help now. I'm weird about it, and I shouldn't be weird about it. My biggest hurdle is I want to pay people. I don't believe in free work if I am making money. It's very different if it's 4 friends coming together and doing something on the side, knowing that you're not doing this for money right now and it could turn into something bigger. I feel weird, and I'm not making enough money right now that I feel in a comfortable position. And again, I'm in a very comfortable position that I live with my husband and I have a tech background and I have some money aside. But I feel weird about free labor. I just do. And again, like, that's the European inside of me. It feels icky asking people. And it's weird because I did the beginner's guide, the 4th version of the beginner's guide, had 3 people who came in and were like, we just want to help. We want to write. I don't. And I wasn't making money from the beginner's guide. So I was like, okay, you know what? I'll get over myself for this one. There's no money being made. And I was very honest. If someone does pick it up and someone does want to sponsor it, then absolutely we'll divvy it up. So I think that's my main hurdle, and I just need to get over myself because there are so many young people around me who just like, I just want experience. And I'm like, okay, I think that makes sense. And I think I'm looking at it as too black and white when it's not that black and white. So that's my first hurdle that I just need to get over myself. The second thing is, I'm looking for people. I think I don't have the time right now to quote unquote manage or take someone on a journey with me. And when I was a manager, when I was a team leader, when I was an executive at tech companies, we brought in interns, we did all of that. And the biggest mistake most people did was thinking they needed help, but wouldn't actually set that person up for success. And that actually takes time. Like, if you want an intern, set them up for success. You have to work with them. You have to collaborate with them. You have to actually take them on your journey and not just let them figure shit out. Like, it's one of my pet peeves, and I don't have the time to do it. And this is all sounding like excuses, and I'm fully aware of this. I don't have the time to do that. So where I am focusing, Savannah, is who can I create with? Who can I actually collaborate with? Where I'm just like, we're both coming at it from different lenses. And so I'm going to do a couple of actually good collaborations this year. And I'm working with someone on the next drop, and she's coming in. I'm like, you know what? I have no issues because I love delegating. And if I can find people I truly trust, then I'm just like, go off and do your thing, and we'll meet in the middle. And I know that we're going to come at it from the same lens, and we're going to be on the same, it doesn't even need to be the same lens, but I know we're going to be on the same page in one way, shape or form. So I think, Savannah, that's where I flipped from, is instead of asking for help, and at one point I may need to actually have help, I'm actually looking at who are the collaborators in this space that I can collaborate on. And maybe when I'm more established, and look, that's a conversation that a lot of creators have. Are you trying to build a company, or do you want to be a sole content creator? And if you're going to be a sole content creator, you have to build around you all of these people who can collaborate with you and help, like an editor, someone who's going to help you shoot and film and all of that. Or are you building a company and do you want people to work for you? And then that means I have no desire right now to be put back in a managerial position. Again, most managers are terrible. Everyone thinks that you need to become a manager to climb the corporate ladder. Most people should never manage human beings. There's a lot to dissect there about managing people. And I am enjoying right now having to only care for myself, which sounds really selfish, but I just know it's the space I need to be in right now. And so I'm looking at that collaborative route. But it's a great question, Savannah, because I think it's a question that a lot of creators have right now is, I need help, but what form does that come in? And I don't think there's any right or wrong form. I just think you need to figure out what works for you. And be very honest what everyone gets out of it. Because, I get that there are some people who are like, I want to help write the beginner's guide. And what I get out of it is being able to attach my name to a project and say that that's part of something that I did. And I'm like, okay, cool, that makes sense. I'm excited for you if that's the thing that you're excited by. But I never want to feel like I'm taking advantage of someone. Hence the first thing, which I know is my hurdle. I want to pay people. Which, yeah.
So you've actually said something that we've been thinking about as well. You said having somebody to edit and having somebody to film content with you for you and having to collaborate with people. Is that something that would make it harder to become like a content creator if you're on your own because you do need a bit of a team to produce that high quality content, like, you know, just high resolution on the video, for example, to then attract a good audience.
You know what? I've seen so many, and this comes with no deep research, no stats, no numbers, just purely what I've seen and hearsay in this industry, is there's so much content that now needs to be produced by Formula One teams, and you see it, and a lot of it is being done internally, but they like working with agencies and people on the side. And what I'm seeing is they'd much rather hire a content creator who can do everything, who can shoot, film, edit, re-record something, do a voiceover, have the creative ideas. A one-man band, they would much rather hire that than the agencies that come in with like 18 fucking people. And I think that's a thing of the past, but I also think when you think of it from budget constraints, they're looking at this going, sure, the quality is going to be 4x, 2x, a little bit better than the one woman, one man band. But is it worth it? Are we going to get exponentially more value out of that? And I take the example of Charles Leclerc on TikTok. Like, his high value produced content is beautiful for YouTube. Is it made for TikTok? No. Is he gaining more followers because he's got a 4K resolution and it was shot by 6 different? I don't think so. I honestly don't think so. People are there for Charles, and I generally think that if Charles Leclerc just went through his comments and took 5 or 4 comments and every week just like responded to a couple of questions, that shit, like, that would blow up, in my opinion, way more, because he's understanding the platform. So look, I do think also the reason why I say that is because I think don't let that level of quality or this mistake that you need a team to stop you from just starting. Because truly, I look back at the content that I was looking, the content that got Aston Martin excited. It wasn't great content. And every year and every month, I'm getting exponentially better. The quality of the content that was there was I put time into doing my research and getting the right answers and for someone else that might be different. That quality might be, I'm really funny, like my jokes are well thought out jokes, or I'm really good with TikTok trends, or I'm really good with pop culture. And yes, I might film it and it's a bit wonky, but that's not the thing that's not going to get you the job. That's not the thing that's not going to get people to go, this is really good content. And actually some of the content that I consume, the editing behind it, and I look at it for different reasons. Sometimes you look at it because you want to be taken on the journey, and obviously if you're in storytelling and filmmaking, then yeah, it'd be better if it's well edited and well put together. But I also think that what most people don't talk about is like, this is an exponential journey. So I'm going to spend a bit more money now with an editor that's going to help me put together a YouTube video together. That's a bit of money that I've been able to make from partnership with Twitch or elsewhere, though Twitch would hate if I'm using the money that I made from Twitch to help create content on YouTube, but hey-ho. But don't ever let that stop you. I think the way I look at it, Liz, is just like, how can you just be the better version of yourself tomorrow? And that's both as a human, but also with the content that you're putting out there. And so I've started to teach myself how to edit. But truly what I've seen from teams is if you can show yourself as being a one-woman band, one-man band, like that, there's something really interesting there for the teams. But I say that, and I did try something different with Formula E, which is coming with another content creator and having that person help me film a lot of B-roll and hold the camera while I'm doing interviews with Stoffel Van Dorn, so that I'm not standing like this trying to do an interview, which is just weird. And honestly, that was a great help. But that goes back to my point about collaboration. So that person didn't come to me as a filmmaker or an editor. It was just like, we're 2 content creators and how can we support each other? So how can I hold the camera when you need it and vice versa? And I think out of that you get, so that's where my head is also spinning, of just like, how can I do these things in duos with other content creators and we both leave there with everything that we need. And again, that will probably not work for someone else, but that's the way I'm thinking about it right now. People love self-starters. People love that you can rock up to an interview. Like it was just, there was something magical in Formula E of just, stuff going, cool, I've only got 10 minutes. What's the setup look like? And I just basically clipped a mic on him. I was like, we're good. And he was like, oh, that was it. I was like, we're rolling. And the quality was great. The audio was spectacular. The video was great. Like, it's a great little 5-part interview. But his face you could tell that he's like, I don't have it in me to sit here and wait for someone to set up lighting and that. And I was just, and there's something very nerve-wracking because I'm like, if this fails, there's no one else to blame. But I was like, the lighting is great. We're outside. We've got great natural light. All I need is a mic next to you and a camera. And our iPhones these days, the quality of the video is exceptional. And you could see on his face that there was a moment of, oh, we're good. I was like, we're good. We're rolling. Chat. And it was 5 minutes in and out, and I got as much content as I think a traditional. And again, there's always a time and a space for big broadcast, big productions, obviously. But you could see that he was like, oh, that was painless and easy. I would do that again. Versus hold there, let me set up a chair, no, just roll. And it truly, I just like came with my little mic.
We're getting away with it a lot here because we're doing these interviews online. It actually means that we get to basically record them as opposed to needing 3 cameras and lights and microphones and all of that. So it's going to be a bit nerve-wracking when we start doing our first in-person interviews, but for now,
and you adapt.
Yeah,
you adapt. And look, when it's funny that you're saying, like, talking about having to adapt to IRL, think about the amount of people who only did podcasts with everyone in the room, or who only did videos with and who had to figure out this, and they were just like, wait, we have to get on a call, and their bandwidth was crazy, didn't have good Wi-Fi, like they didn't have a camera, they didn't, so there's all these little, but as long as you're a self-starter, I think, and you've got that attitude of, we'll figure it out, it's, we do our research, we learn, we watch a YouTube video, and off you go. I definitely spent 4 hours trying to figure out how to set up my remote Bluetooth mics, and I was like, what am I doing wrong? And it was such a stupid thing, but you figure it out, and you pass on that knowledge to the next person, which I generally did. And formerly, that person bought the same mics, and I was like, there's 2 things you need to know that I really messed up. And he's like, oh, great, thanks. Best moments.
Well, I guess in like kind of that regard, like talking about obviously doing it all for yourself, blah, blah, blah. How do you sort of look at covering expenses? How much is paid sort of by yours? How much expected to versus sort of, we've invited you here, so we'll cover flights, food, hotel stays, etc.
Savannah, you've probably asked one of my favorite topical questions of the moment, because it's so hard. And I'll say before I answer that, I will say one thing. Don't hesitate to ask for help. I was really bad at that because I don't know what happened. Well, I actually probably do know what happened in my youth, but that I just like don't like asking for help. I don't like this feeling of I owe you something. So I've always stayed away from it. And again, I've surrounded myself by people who are so kind, so generous, so nice, who are just like, shut up, we're helping you. And I'm like, okay. And they'll get viscerally angry at me because they're like, you need help, we're here to help. So I will say about everything that I'm talking about, like do it yourself, be a self-starter, there is something very valuable. And it sounds like the 3 of you have a good thing going, that you can know when you need to ask for help. But I would say that is, you can't do everything alone. To your question about financing and monetization, first thing to know is there's no blueprint. No one's done this before. Everyone's wading through shit. Quite frankly, the contracts make no sense. The contracts are influencer contracts when they should be creator contracts. There's a lot that you're looking at going, this doesn't feel right, but you don't quite know, which again, like that's something of like worth asking for help and worth talking with creator expert lawyers who know about this space. Just things like owning your IP, like the stuff that you're filming belongs to you and doesn't belong to the person that you're filming for. Like there's things to look through contact. And I'm no lawyer, so I'm not going to pretend that I can give that amount of insights, but there's a lot of information online about that. The second piece is, or the third piece actually, is don't ever think you need to cover things that you can't afford to cover. Like, as I say, like don't go out and buy, and I know everyone's bored people to death with this, but don't go and buy the expensive camera. Don't go and buy initially the mics. It might not be perfect, but ask if you can borrow stuff. Like these are expenses you shouldn't have at the start. Then there's something to be said about this industry, especially the motorsport industry, works with, if we see you, we think about you. If we don't see you, you're not top of mind, which again is the bit that I love and I joke about. I live on the internet. But if I live on the internet and I don't show up at the paddocks and racetracks, and I am an introvert, so this is my comfort zone, but if I don't show up IRL in the spaces where everyone is making decisions, I am forgotten about completely. Why? Because right now I'm completely indispensable. I'm one of, as I think, Shana, you mentioned, like, or it might be Liz, like thousands and thousands of content creators out in the world. There's always, and that's the hard thing about being a content creator, is there are 20 people gunning to be like, if you stop, I'll take over your content, like that. Fair enough, as it should be. So you're constantly having to think about, like, keep moving. And I say that because you have to find ways that you can show up and be smart about where you show up. And so what I mean by that is you don't, with general admissions to a Formula E, and again, think about it, Formula E races are really, really affordable to attend compared to Formula One. So if you're thinking about this going, you want to get into Formula One, but realistically right now, the prices are skyrocketing. They don't care about being open to content creators. They don't think they need the exposure right now. But NASCAR, IndyCar, Formula E are all vying for that exposure and that credibility and that relevancy that these young content creators are offering. I would start there. Have a look at how, because not only is Formula E affordable, but the access you get is exponential compared to anything else. That's the same for IndyCar. You can be like 30 centimeters away. There's no such thing as the paddock. Everyone can walk around the paddock and walk into the garages, and you can make connections. And also think about it, is most of the social media people, the people who are looking after the creator programs or influencer programs, are probably your age. And so just like, they're the people you want to be connecting with. Forget the big decision makers right from the get-go. Who's looking after the social media accounts, and start having those conversations. And so I would say, from a financial perspective, have a look at where you can get more bang for your buck. And sometimes it is like, I loved going to, IndyCar in Long Beach, because the amount of content I got, it was so incredible. Just visual content, audio content, all of that was great for the videos that I wanted to make afterwards. So that was helpful. And then here's where it gets really hard and difficult, is if on one end of the spectrum you have influencers who, and I'm going to say the very traditional influencers, pay to talk about our product. It's a transaction, that's the thing that happens. And all on the other way, you have journalists, and you have the code of conduct, you have the journalistic integrity. You can't be seen being bribed, you can't be seen getting preferential treatment. Like, there is all of that very, very strict code of what you can and can't do as a journalist, which is actually one of the reasons why I feel deeply uncomfortable. And I tell people, don't call me a journalist. I know that some people will say, but you do the same journalistic. Well, yeah, but I haven't signed up to the same code of ethics. So until the day that I sign up to the code of ethics of the journalistic integrity, I don't feel like I consider myself a journalist. And I think content creators are somewhere in the middle. And I say this because, for example, I don't do pay to play. So what I don't do is, we'll pay you some money, talk about our brand, talk about our series, talk about our team, just because I'm not a marketing billboard. I'm not a billboard. I'm not advertising. I see myself as something very different. However, yes, please, I do want the money. That is very interesting to me. Why? Because I'm going to spend days doing research. I'm going on site. I'm traveling with you. And these are all days where I can't live stream, where I can't make money there, where I'm not putting out a YouTube video. So you have to look at it in that perspective. So, and this is not going to work for everyone, but what has worked for me is there something that we can work on together where there's an exchange of value for finance? For example, with Aston Martin, come and talk and host an event, host a fan event, host our fan event for our car launch, host a fireside conversation with Sebastian Vettel. Absolutely. There's a transaction there that happens between, come, we pay for travel and accommodation. Some of the times, honestly, I was already traveling there, so travel didn't need to be covered. But there is a monetary transaction there for my time as a presenter, an interviewer, and all the prep that goes into that. And then this is where I call it the cherry on the cake, which is, now that I'm here and we have a good relationship, can I have access to the paddock? Can I have access to the garage? Why? Because that will allow me to get content that separates me from everyone else. That will allow me to get content to help me take my stories. What Aston Martin gets out of that, or any other brand that I would work with, is all the stories that I'm telling, all the footage that I'm shooting, it's Aston Martin branded everywhere. And so there's huge value for them, is that they get, by association, all of my audience that's consuming my community, that's consuming my short form stories. They're seeing this through the lens of the Aston Martin paddock, the Aston Martin garage, and the Aston Martin drivers, because they're the ones that gave me the access. And so I think there's what I call a no-lose situation here, where both of us, I leave with great content, great insights, and they leave with someone else telling their stories, but also their branding being visible all over the internet, because that's the footage that I have. But where I try and avoid at all cost is, we'll give you money, talk about our brand. Because I think it gets iffy, because then if you're paying me for that, then you can get to say what I should and shouldn't say. It also means that if I want to be critical about something, which I often am, not because I don't like the sport or don't like the team, just because I think it's important to remain critical. That's really hard to do when you're being paid to create that type of content. And again, I say all of this, Savannah, and I caveat this with, it is a massive grey zone right now, and you have to tread lightly, but also I think we're in an opportunity that we can try new and different things. But hopefully that was helpful. And I'm sure if you talk with another content creator, they would go at it differently. But the key thing out of all of that is find the thing that makes sense for you. And Lizzie McIntosh does this really well. Like, she is a content creator now, but also she has a job to do with Formula One TV. She has a job to do with her podcast. Like, that's very clear. And then on top of that, this gives her access and gets her into spaces where she can create content for her channels.
Well, so obviously we talked about, like, even in that bit, like the amount that you have to do. So obviously, I said when you're traveling, you're sacrificing not being able to stream, and obviously that has its financial implications.
Yeah.
But how do you juggle that? Because obviously there'll be an expectation from the people that subscribe to you on certain channels or whatever, that you're creating content. So how do you manage, okay, well, I've missed it 3 weeks in a row, I need to now create it, etc.
And this is where another great question. Yeah, I'm rethinking all my things. These are all the things that I'm thinking about, no joke, right now. It's really incredible. I'm a proponent of try it all. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Also, because the things that I thought that I would love the most, I actually ended up struggling with them. The newsletter is a perfect example. I love writing. I was like, this is going to be easy. Once a week, my newsletter was initially 3 topics, and I don't think I've opened it in a year. It's just really bad. It was 3 topics, 1 in pop culture, 1 in tech, 1 in politics, and then it had a little bit about motorsports, and I loved it. But my God, do I overthink my writing, which meant that for me, getting out even just 4 little pieces of information out in a newsletter and sending it out to thousands of people, I overthought it so much that it became so hard for me. Whereas I don't overthink as much going live on Twitch. And it's the same content, but I don't overthink it because I'm more comfortable as a public speaker than I am as a writer. And as a writer, I keep getting in my head going, who the fuck do I think I am? I'm not a great writer. I don't, even though people say, no, I love the way you write. And so I've got more of an imposter syndrome with that. But I generally thought, Savannah, that it would be so much easier for me to do a newsletter weekly than to do 2 times live stream. So as much as I'm a big proponent of try it all and do it all, there is something of, at some point, make a decision. What do you love doing the most, and what can you put in more time and more effort? And I think that's where my head is at right now. Of, again, I'm adding YouTube to my channel, but what is it? Do I love the Twitch stream so much that that's the thing I need to prioritize? And the best advice I ever got from anyone in this space is a guy called Jack Cook, who's an incredible filmmaker based in LA, who does these short form videos on TikToks that are 60-second, and he does one every day. Every day it's his life. There's something happened, and it could be as basic, very Emma Chamberlain, of he cleaned his gutters or he went to a party, but it's 60 seconds, and you can see he's clearly set up his camera at least 30 times during the day and captured like 2 or 3 seconds. And I asked him, how the hell do you get this done when I know that you're editing podcasts for other people, you're working on documentaries, you have a you're doing all of this other stuff. How do you make time to prioritize this video? And he's done now 500 days in a row, a video every single day, has not missed a single day. It is insane. He makes no money from these videos. And he said, well, hold up a minute. You're thinking about it the wrong way. This is the sole thing that I prioritize. Everything else can be dropped. Even the client work, I can push back a day, or I'll work on it in the number one thing that I need to get done every single day is this. And it's because he was thinking long term. He's got a story now to tell of what it looked like for him to document his life for 500 days in a row. It also meant that he was showcasing so many products during the day. The drinks that he drinks, the eggs that he uses. And he now has a partnership, no joke, with the egg brand with which he makes his scrambled eggs more or less every day. Like, it's just insane. And so there's something worth saying about what's the one thing, what's your North Star that you know is going to pay off if you will remain extremely consistent with that. And that could be your TikTok videos like it is for him. It could be your Twitch stream or your YouTube, and even I'm struggling. I only live streamed once last week, and this week I was supposed to do it on Monday, but I had to move it to Wednesday, and I don't like it, but especially because I know people like consistency. They like to know that they can tune in on Monday and Thursday and expect content from me. So I don't have the perfect answer on that. I would just say you've got to try it all so that you can figure out what makes the most sense to you and to your audience and where you can stand out. And then you've got to remain consistent. I know people say, just create when you can, but imagine if, you turned on the news and the BBC was like, nah, we decided not to do the news tonight. You'd be like, well, and that's truly a weird thing. Like, do you look at content creators as just a bit of fun and entertainment, or do you go to them because you actually need that information? You need something. And so to your point, in everything that you're building, if you become that go-to for information, people are going to expect to be able to come back and get something new and get relevant information and get answers to questions that they have. And it's a very valuable relationship, but also something that you can't take for granted that you're building there. Of people expect, and expect is maybe the wrong word, but you've built that expectation around that there's content waiting for you. And people are fickle. And if you miss it once, twice, 3, 4 times, people go, peace out. I'll spend my money elsewhere. I'll spend my time elsewhere. And it's not mean. It's just, the best example is the news. Imagine if the BBC decided, we don't have the news for you tonight. Sorry. Kudos.
Well, going on from that consistency in that long term, I guess a big thing that a lot of creators think about is just sustainability. Now, I'm thinking, you as a content creator, do you think what you're doing right now is sustainable? Do you think F1 content creators in general as a scope is sustainable? Because while TikTok is such a big platform, I think when you have a certain niche and you're a content creator for that certain niche, how long will that live on that platform has always been something I think about. And also, how sustainable do you think this relationship with F1 is going to be? Because we've seen F1 hone into media and content creators a lot last year, and really, okay, we've seen the value in this. How long do you think they're going to keep that? Do you think they have this short term of they've seen, okay, wait, we know that they're engaging this young audience. Yeah, we should really focus on it. Are they going to keep doing that? Is this a proper avenue down the line in even 2-3 years?
Is it sustainable? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to push back into, I don't think F1 have done anything for content creation. Truly, I don't. Honestly, Lizzie McIntosh is maybe the only one. The F1, and I mean truly F1, has done anything. Sky Sports has started a little bit, and I think ESPN. I think the traditional media is going to start. I think the teams woke up last year, and I think the teams have really woken up this year. And I think it's just going to be a shift in relationship. And I think it's just going to be a different type of job description. They're going to, again, it's still a gray zone. We're still going to figure it out for the next 2 to 3 years. And I think some of it's going to fail and some of it's going to stick. And I think the pieces that are going to stick of when the teams realize this is an incredibly valuable relationship. For example, we can have one full-time camera person with us, but we actually don't need 3 or 4. What we are going to do is we're going to divide up the calendar into 3 parts, and we're going to work with different types of content creators who are also photographers throughout the year, or videographers. And that's what we're going to do instead, which means that they can have their own life, but this is a gig that they take on for 3 to 4 months. And I think that becomes more valuable because you're each tapping into your different audiences. For the creator, it makes exceptional content. Jack Cook is a perfect example. He got into Formula One. And he got very into Formula One. He got invited by Alpine last year. Alpine were figuring out, like, okay, now he's here now, what do we do with him? And I think they figured it out together. But he has no desire to go full into Formula One, but he likes dipping his toe in and out of it. And I think that's good because he brings a whole different lens to it. So what I will say is I'm more of just like, let's light a fire underneath F1's backside, because I don't think they even scratched the surface of what's possible. But I think it will evolve and look fundamentally different than what it does today. There's a lot of thing that scares people of working with creators. You're working with someone who's deeply opinionated. You're working with someone who's going to bring their own audience, and that audience might not fit your brand as an F1 team or an F1 driver, and there might be a clash there. And it's the same problems with content creators. I've often thought of myself this: are people going to think, oh wait, has she all of a sudden become an ambassador for Aston Martin? And so that's why I'm just like, no, I don't only work with Aston Martin. It is my most visible content. But also, I hope people don't see me because I've been able to create that critical lens, which ties back to the conversation of it's not pay to play. And so there's all of these conversations, I think, tie into one another. So I think just like everything else, I think being a social media manager wasn't a thing, 5 years ago, and people, it was a add on to someone else's job of, can you just check our Twitter account? And now it's become not even just a full-fledged job. It's like such a demanding job. I just think it's going to evolve. But more than anything, I think this year is the year that F1 is going to open up a little bit. But F1's just figured out influencers, F1's so behind that they're still like, oh my God, we can have an influencer on the grid alongside Tom Cruise. They're just a little bit behind, but the teams are definitely playing catch up. And I think the likes of ESPN and Sky Sports have definitely played catch up. And I think that's going to be interesting.
So on that, and you mentioned you're thinking it's taking off more this year. Do you think content creators are going to be taken more seriously and as an actual career and a job role rather than, say, just something new right now that can bring their audience and a young audience this new BTS?
Yeah.
I hate saying, but will this?
But
be
it's very true. Yeah.
Yeah. Will this be something that they actually see value in?
I also realized, Sean, I didn't answer your other question, in the previous one, which was about, now I've just lost it, but you had another question, which was, God, I hate when this happens.
Would it to do with the sustainability, unless that was...
So, yeah, with the sustainability of it, which I thought was really interesting, because that's why I don't do chasing the headlines and do the beats, because that any journalist who's worked on the beat, any journalist who's had to cover like the breaking news of anything, whether it's the White House, whether it's Bloomberg, whether it's being on the Google or Amazon beat, like it is exhausting because nothing else matters and you're constantly chasing the next headline and you see everything through a lens of drama and and not everything is breaking news. And so I think that for content creators who are doing that, I think it can be very exhausting, and I don't know how sustainable it is. And I will say any journalist will tell you can do that for 2 or 3 years. It's like being a personal assistant to a super, important exec or CEO. It is exhausting because you live your eyes through someone else's lens. And there's a little bit of that. That's also why, Shauna, that I decided that I wasn't going to consume or wasn't going to only create the breaking news, even though every time I do that, my videos perform really well. I'd rather talk about the evergreen content because it means I can do it in my own pace, in my own time. No one's coming to me for like the breaking news, and I actually don't mind it. There's obviously days where I look at it and go, oh, I could grow so much faster if I did that. So sorry, I realized I didn't answer that. What was your second question that you just asked?
Whether you think content creators are being taken seriously or will be taken seriously as a proper role within the team.
I think people are still getting around to it. I think similarly to how people are still struggling taking some YouTubers seriously, which I find absolutely interesting. And I watched an interview with Marques Brownlee, who's one of the most well-known YouTubers in the tech space. And he started, I think he's been doing it now 13, 14 years, which is insane. And someone asked him, which I thought was so good, someone asked him, did you ever look at YouTube as a stepping stone, or was YouTube your final destination? Because a lot of people look at YouTube as, this is how I'm going to create my own late night show. This is how I'm going to create my own, I'm going to become a news anchor. Talk about Lizzie again, just because she's very top of mind for me right now, but talk about someone who used her TikTok to be able to become a presenter. And I've never gone at it that way. I have no desire to do traditional media right now. I don't mind working with traditional media, but I am not doing this to become an F1 presenter or commentator. Like, that's just not my journey. And so it was interesting hearing this conversation with Marques of just like, did you ever want to own a traditional show? And he's like, do you know how many millions of views my videos get? Why would I want to go to a traditional channel or a traditional broadcaster where the eyeballs are far lesser? And so they then brought up Emma Chamberlain as an example. I can't remember what podcast this was on. It might come to me. But they were using Emma Chamberlain as, well, look, she used YouTube somewhat as a stepping stone because now she's presenting the Met Gala and she's presenting Louis Vuitton show. And then Marques said, where did you consume that content? And the presenter was like, well, what do you mean? Where did you watch that video of Emma at the Met Gala? And he was like, oh, on YouTube. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, that is genius right there. Because every time you think you should treat YouTube or Twitch to be seen and to be hired by a bigger, well-known brand, an established media, actually think about it the other way of, where's everyone consuming all the content? We're all even Sky Sports clips, ESPN clips. I'm not consuming it on my traditional TV. I'm not consuming it live when it's being broadcast. I'm consuming it on YouTube. And I share all of that to say, I absolutely think that people who are not taking content creators seriously are missing something massive in the shifting landscape. And I think you're kidding yourselves if you think you're going to use content creators to turn them into traditional broadcasters. And I don't think that's going away. I just think people are missing a moment here that being a Twitch streamer or YouTube streamer is equally as valuable. as being a presenter on Sky Sports or ESPN. And I know that especially for our parents, I know that if I went to my dad and I'd be like, oh, I'm going to present on Sky Sports, he'd be like, oh my God, this is incredible. He doesn't care that I'm doing stuff on Twitch. He doesn't know what Twitch is. And so there is that thing, but like, why are you doing? So anyway, the biggest thing to that is why I love that question, Shana, because it's about forward thinking. And I know that we always want the tap on the back or the thumbs up from someone who's already made it, but don't forget that they made it 20 years ago, 50 years ago. Are they still relevant today? And it's really hard to look at yourself and look around you and and for young content creators to go, no, I am it. I'm the future. They just don't get it yet. And I truly believe that. And I am probably older than most of the content creators. And it's the thing that I look at them and I see some of them and I go, oh, you get it. Like you're not waiting for the green light from Sky Sports. You're not waiting for the relevancy, and I put that in air quotes, from a Sky Sports or from an ESPN. I say that with all the respect in the world, but they're looking at it going, this is it. YouTube is it. This is the place where I can get 100 million followers, which is kind of insane. And you do look at how much the Super Bowl ads cost, and you look at how many people actually saw the Super Bowl, and Mr. Beast came out and go, hey, if you want better bang for your buck, come and advertise on my channel where I can guarantee you 20 million views. And so how can you not, to your point, Shana, how can you not take that seriously? And I'm not saying they'll get it. I think, again, we're talking about institutions who've been around for 50, 70 years and who've, been at the forefront of many big changes. And, whether it went from radio to TV to there's a lot of respect that we should have for what they've built. But I also think there's a lot of respect equally that should be had for the next generation of people actually creating content that people are actually consuming.
No, definitely. I completely agree. And I just want to take it back to your content for a little bit here. You've been very outspoken about context and research before all of your content. Has that now created a bit of a burden in terms of now people expect that from you with all your content? Are you able to still make fun content or really easily without research? I heard something fun, I want to post it out. Or do you have this thing of, okay, wait, no, I need to go home. I need to research it first before I put it up?
Yeah. And good God, I feel like you live in my head. Yes, there are days there are days where I'm truly just walking around and I have an idea and I pick up and I shoot and I film it and I'm like, and I have it. I just like, oh, I'm not sure if that stat's correct. Oh, I'm not sure if that number. Oh, I think I'm missing something. Oh, actually, I can't have that conversation without. And that's the paradox of doing a video on TikTok, which I just have to shake. And I'll say this for anyone who everyone's always going to have an issue with your video, because on the same video, I'll have someone who says, all right, love, get to the point. That was long-winded and it's a 30-second video. And in the same video and in the same vein, I'll get someone go, well, that's not completely accurate. You're missing X, Y. I'm like, it's a 30-second TikTok. Like, which one is it? Was I not quick enough or did I not give enough context? And it can't be both. I'm working on that, Shana. I've tried. I joked that 2023 was going to be the year that I'm going to have a little bit of fun with it. But again, I come from an older generation where if I was to make it in the workforce, I had to prove myself and I had to be taken seriously. And I had to, for my bosses, I not pretended, but I acted as someone who was 20 years their senior. And it did mean that I got promotions way faster than anyone else. But it did also mean that I missed out on all of the fun nights out at the pub because I was working and pretending I was part of the exec team. And which is kind of an idiotic saying, but there is one that I definitely did, which is dress for the job you want, not the job you have, which again, I love Gen Z right now because they're like middle fingers up. I'm like, what do you mean I should dress for the job I want? That's idiotic, which I love. I look at that and go, it's actually so right. So I'm trying to have a little bit of fun with it, but you've hit the nail on the head. I try and be a bit more gentle with myself, but I do think I've set that expectation, which is why I'm looking at diversifying my content, which is why the people who know me best, when I do a video, they're like, yeah, but she talked about this for 2.5 hours on Twitch. What more do you want from the woman? And I appreciate that deeply because I can say that time and time again. And so I do think there's something there for me of just telling people, hey, this is a 30-second of a 2-hour conversation. If you want it, and this is where you use the funnel. If you want the full conversation, you go to Twitch. If you want a 20-minute deep dive into this, go to YouTube. And I think that's what I need to do. And because I didn't have all of these funnels, yes, I treated every single one of my TikTok video as if that was the final last thing, which isn't true. I also talk about this so often of we're a work in progress. I hope that tomorrow I discover something else that should have added to my videos 10 days ago. And I'm like, okay, start again, add that to the video, which I'm really bad at. But the best content creators would tell you, find your most successful videos and do them all over again, do them better, add more context, start, which I'm very, I feel like I work in like a book era where I'm just like, oh, that chapter's closed, that's been written, that's done, versus like an ebook where you can constantly go in and change it and adapt it. And I maybe think that's the headspace I need to shift to more of, like, the book isn't written, it's not published, it's online, take it down, rework it, start again. There are thousands of people who haven't seen that piece of content that might want, which is, again, no one teaches you how to work. Like, I was taught to write a paper, make sure it's there, make sure the sources are there, make sure the footnotes are, and once it's done, it's done. And again, like, the university teaches us a lot of things, but that is a thing that's not true if you're a content creator. It doesn't need to be done. Do another video the next day.
So actually, you said that 2023 was going to be your year of doing fun content. Are you having fun with your content?
I am. It is. I am a very cerebral, nerdy person, and I am also a very anxious person that I always look at. And every time I go on stream, this is my point. Every time I go on stream, I go, this is where my audio doesn't work, the video crashes, I say something completely stupid, I say something and black out, I'm rude to someone, which again is all the worst things that people look at me and go, have you ever done any of these things? No. Are you a rude person? No. Are you racist, sexist, misogynist? And I was like, no, I'm not. Then what are you worried about? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm just that anxious person that is always like, worst case scenario, I'm going to blurt out something that makes no sense and make a fool of myself, or worse, like hurt someone, which I don't want to do. But I am having fun. I am definitely trying to have more fun. And I think the biggest realization for me is what I deem as fun, some people are going to like and some people are not going to like, and that's totally okay. And I honestly think at the end of the day, as long as you're a decent human being, both online and offline, it doesn't actually matter what you put out there in the world if people like it or don't like it. But that's, again, it's a really hard thing to do, because it's a weird thing to wake up one morning and have people say, we hate you, or your content's due, and you go, oh my God, what did I do? I'm so sorry, I guess. But journalists, journalists and TV presenters have been dealing with this for years. And I just think it's weird. It's the type of stuff that we don't talk about. Again, as more and more people like live online, everything we consume is online, everything, we're more open to putting things online. Who teaches you like how to handle people liking you for you and not you for you? Who teaches you how to make the difference between content? Who teaches you the difference between having an opinion and disagreeing with someone online and actually being horrible to it? Like, no one teaches you any of this stuff, which is fascinating, and has also been really interesting looking at Gen Z as they spend more and more time online. There's some real skill sets that are being developed right now, I find.
So just on that note, because you've just said that there's a lot of skills that you need to develop yourself. Do you have any advice to give to people who are looking to go into content creation as a career, that you say, like, that you think is not maybe not obvious, or it's not something that people would think about, or just any advice for somebody looking to follow in your footsteps a little bit?
I mean, you've got to want to enjoy the process. It's a weird thing of thinking, I don't know how to edit a video and I'm going to put out a thing in the world and the editing is shit. Like, it's really bad. And you go, oh, okay. This is the thing that isn't talked about, is the 30-second TikTok isn't the content side. It's the hours of research. It's the interviews. It's the conversations. It's the writing it down. It's the scripting. Like, I script my things, then I read it and then I look at it and I go, is that going to flow right? Do I start it fast enough? Do I give out all the information? Because there is, as much as it's an algorithm, so I can't be an idiot and think, well, I'm just going to do it my way. Well, if I do it my way, no one's ever going to see the video, and then it becomes a weird conversation about, God, I need to start the video in a certain way to attract attention, and you need to, if it's YouTube, you need to think about the thumbnail. It's all of that, which honestly is true for any job. There is the thing that you think the job is, and then there's the 90% of the work that is absolutely not what you think it is. And we talk about this when I have a hard time sharing just the, like, it's why I don't share a day in the life of or stuff like that, because it's basically me sat at my desk brainstorming and on calls with people. I've been on 5 calls this morning so far, and it's not even 12 o'clock my time. And I'm just like, I need to get my work done, but I'm going to be sat on, there's days that I joke that I have like, my phone tells me I've not hit 100 steps, and I'm like, oh, this is mortifying. Shauna's face is like, 100. Oh no, it's bad. There are days where I'm just like, I am just researching and writing, and it's not sexy at all. And I think I worry sometimes when we look at the Ariana Bravas of the world, the Lizzie McIntoshes of the world, the Natalie Pinkhams of the world, and it all looks really glamorous. And you have to realize they are jet lagged, running on fuels, constantly working. You're rewriting your questions until 3 a.m. You're sleeping for 2 hours. You're up and standing on your feet. You're supposed to look presentable in 36-degree heat waves, or I know most people would say 36 degrees isn't a heat wave. I'm a very pale redhead. It's a heat wave for me. But like, these are the things that to your point, Elizabeth, you have to love it. You have to love, and by it, the it isn't the 10 minutes on screen if it's a presenter that you want to be, or the 5-minute interview. You have to love the whole thing. And it doesn't mean you have to enjoy it. It doesn't mean you have to push back when you're like, hey, these working conditions are not okay. But if I'm not waking up every morning going, I wonder what I can discover today or what story I can tell, then I'm doing the wrong thing. And I would say a lot of founders have said the same thing. If you can think of doing anything other than being a founder, do that. Like, truly. And I actually think it's starting to get to the point with content creators. If you can think of doing anything else that makes you happy full time, do that, and have the content creator as a side gig, which there's so many great content creators who do this on the side. Doing it full time, like, it's rough. And you've got to love the process. You've got to love screaming. I mean, no one loves it, but you've got to be okay with just like you're screaming at a computer trying to figure out how to work, a Bluetooth microphone. Then need to that you then need to clip onto a world champion, and no one's there to help you. If it doesn't work and it's not recording, you're the one that looks like an idiot, and that was your one shot, and you're probably never going to get a second opportunity to do that. And gotta be okay with that. And some people are very good, very relaxed, and that's why sometimes I'm like, why am I doing this again? Because I'm very good with it, but I'm definitely a nervous person that looks at every worst case scenario, how everything could go wrong.
You've actually said something that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it. That's the only advice I can think of that's maybe not been.
No, you've actually said something that I think is relevant to a lot more people than just content creators. So I'm an engineering student, and I went through my own personal journey, which was quite intense. And when you said, you have to really love it, I'm sure the girls and the rest of the team know just how many times in the evenings I'll go to bed crying because I just can't do it anymore. It's too many hours. It's too much hard work. And then in the morning I wake up and I'm like, no, but I love this so much that I wouldn't do anything else. Yeah. And I think that really, really does apply to pretty much any hard thing that somebody could do. Like, you really have to love it.
And to your point, the crying in the evening doesn't mean you hate it. It just means it's hard work. It just means it's really difficult. And I have that on days where I feel like I've not delivered, it's getting to be 12 o'clock and I haven't put out a TikTok video, and it's in my head going, you haven't put out the content and you haven't done the thing that you said you were supposed to do. And it just plays on me. And I'm like, but no one sees that I've been on call since like 5:30, 6 a.m. in the morning. It's 6 a.m. It wasn't 5, 6 in the morning. And I've moved so many other projects that people might be aware of in a year from now, but you've got to be okay with that. But I appreciate you sharing that, Liz, because we don't talk about it enough. And like, the crying doesn't make it its bad job. It just means it's really difficult. And again, we glamorize this industry a little bit too much in that these are the conversations I wish we would have more of, even with the drivers of, why is it like, how does Pierre enjoy social media? Like, that's the question I have for him. Like, how do you enjoy social media knowing that anyone, and I say this as someone who fought, and here's a fun tidbit to maybe end on, but I woke up one morning for a message from Pierre Gasly, and I was like, so weird. Open it, and it was in French, and it just said, oh my God, in French it said, he's amazing. And I was like, so confused by this. I'd answered to a friend's story, but it wasn't a friend's story. My friend's stories had ended, and I was on to Pierre Gasly's stories, and I hadn't realized that I was commenting on Pierre Gasly's story, no longer my friend's stories. And so my friend is French, and my friend is an incredible photographer and posts these incredible things. And for me, the content was his, like there was no difference. And it wasn't. For once, Pierre Gasly was talking about something. It was a French artist, and it was about a whole cultural phenomenon. It was phenomenal. And I just wrote going, oh my God, this is so stunning and incredible. And Pierre Gasly responded going, I know, he's amazing. I was like, I'm so confused by this. But I hadn't realized I was sending a message to Pierre Gasly. And so in my head for the last couple of weeks, I'm sitting here going, how does this man enjoy social media, have the time to respond to kind comments, knowing that when he probably opens his inbox, it is full of also hate? Because that is the duality online. As much as there are people who love you, there are people, if you're doing something right, people are going to hate you for it. And I tried, and there are some days where I say something a bit more thought-provoking that some people will not, and I can't go through my messages. I have to delete them all, and there might be some nice messages in there, but I can't deal with reading another message that tells me to go kill myself or any swear word possible. I do not have the mental bandwidth. So to your point, like one of the things that I'm just like so curious with these drivers is like how do you do the fun part of the job and then handle the hideous part of it, and you still love it clearly. Mm-hmm. And to your point, like there's something there, and there's right or wrong, but you've gotta love it. And I don't know how I ended up on like wanting to ask Pierre that question, but it is something that I often think about because he's active online. And like, I don't know how you do it.
Mm-hmm. I have actually got 3 quick fire questions for you.
Okay.
To end this, we torture everyone with these questions.
Oh God.
Okay, they're supposed to be quick fire, but they're surprisingly difficult. So, if you couldn't do your current job in motorsport, what would you want to do?
I think I generally don't know if this is truly, and this is bad, if this is truly me talking or if this is just because it's what I did. I think a politician, but I also know that it's a hard ass job. But I think I'd be a politician probably. Mm-hmm. But I think there's a reason I didn't go down that route, so I don't know if that's a great answer to your question.
Okay, so badly describe your job in 5 words and accurately describe it in 3.
Ooh, badly describe it in 5 words. Endless travel, lots of people, and I'm putting adjectives in front of all of them, which is great. Endless travel, lots of people, fun. What's the opposite of lonely? I guess fun. Humans, people. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. Accurately describing it is long hours, a lot of time alone, and overthinking.
Okay.
Great sexiness definition of being a content creator.
You're the first person to actually have taken the time to sit and think about the answering these questions. We've had a lot of, I don't know.
Oh no.
No response.
Oh no. Those.
Okay, last one. Who inspires you in motorsport?
Can it only be one person?
No, you can just shout out anybody.
She comes with a list of 100 people. So, honestly, the bucket of people who inspire me the most are, and this is going to sound cheesy as hell, but it's not meant to be cheesy. I'm dead serious. Is people like yourselves who are forward thinking about the sport. Like, what's the next generation of the sport? What's missing? What do we need? What can we do that looks completely different to what it is? Like that bucket of people that comes all walks of life, every shape of, like, those are the people that inspire me. Because truly, like, these have been some of the most insightful, interesting, thought-provoking questions I think I've had on a podcast interview or anything of this format. And I think these are the questions that need to be answered also to drivers. Like, these are the questions that I think about. But the people who inspire me the most are, I think it is that bucket of people who are like kicking, and I said this the other day, who are kicking the walls down. And I don't think this industry, and I don't think the people who appreciate the next generation of fans and employees and workers in this space understand just how the full force of this next generation and how it's going to come and come in strong. And I don't know, I think that those are the people who inspire me the most. Not to say that I'm deeply inspired by every single woman who's paved and like, you know, done a little thing that was a mountain at the time that we look back on, and some people say, well, she only achieved X, and I go, well, let's talk about the only, because the reality is she's had to do that with, you know, probably no support. And I say that with the context of being in the paddock at the Austin GP and seeing people truly, you could hear people surprised or talking and confused about the amount of women in the paddock working. And it was content creators, it was the new, and then you could hear them go, who let them in? And you're like, oh, I'm sorry, beg your pardon, what? Or it was like, who are they? And it was truly unheard of to see, like, and I'm talking like groups of 7, 8, 9 women walking in the paddock, and it would be like Ariana, myself, the Grid Click women. We had someone from the FIA, and I remember this moment where there was 7 of us, all with a remit and a reason for being there, all working. And you could see people were really confused. And I think about the Susie Wolfs of the world, the Hannah Schmidts of the world, who've had to go at it alone, who haven't had that group of 9, 8 women, which again, I think this is why when you say who inspires me, I say a group like this, when I see 3 incredible women who just like, we've got each other's back, like whatever it's going to take. And again, I don't think it's their fault. I remember my mum being told, you know, there's only room for one woman here, so if it's going to be you, do what you need to do. And we pitted women again. She said that. I think that has definitely changed, which is cool to see, because what we're realizing is if women actually help each other, we all land at the jobs at the same time, which all means we're all supporting each other instead of being the lone woman who has to prove herself time and time again, or who thinks differently or outside the box. And people go, well, that must be wrong because you're the only one that thinks that. And you're like, of course I'm the only one that thinks that. I'm the only woman at the table. Like, it's not that it's a bad idea. It's that the 9 white men in front of me are going to think the same way, and it's not bad. It's just logic. How do you not see the logic? So yeah, that was a bit of a long-winded answer, but I think that has to be what inspires me. Oh, and on the fun side note, the Peretti guys, like those men, mostly because it is generally, I've yet to see a woman in the Peretti garage, but the work that they do for this motorsport, and I know there's a lot of people who do a lot of work for, you know, motorsports to be what it is. But those dudes, like the fact that they're dealing with 1,600 tires every weekend, and every tire has to, you know, there's something there that always impresses me. I don't know why, I love hanging out and hearing their stories about tires in Formula One. I don't know what it is about that, but